It's me, Neil. Hello. Welcome to the Bogenrieder Variety Hour, where we talk about whatever I want because I'm me, and I have a lot of taste. Okay. So before we start today's show, I do want to get out of the way a couple of agenda items. So we're going to talk about first what is happening today, and then the future stuff. So to begin, I'm doing some updates to my computer. I'm getting two more 200 more 140mm fans, potentially a new CPU cooler, and some more memory. Additionally, I'm buying another cable for HDMI DisplayPort so that I can use the second monitor over here, which has been staring at me blank for the past 2 weeks-ish. So those will be things that are upgrades to my overall build. And in addition to that, we will be discussing games that I'll be playing alongside the Bogenrieder Variety Hour and Monday Dungeons & Dragons streams. So you'll see, hopefully in the near future, playthroughs of Halo the Master Chief Collection, Tom Clancy's Division 2, and Star Trek Online. Maybe some Destiny 2, but I've had some really bad burnout since Season of the Hunt kind of came to a close. So maybe when Season 13 launches, that'll happen. For now, assume that is on the list. But I've had some really bad burnout with that game since I hit max light. So, so right now, let's talk about what we're going to review today. So, real quick, we're going to review Amazing Spider-Man number 57. Also, I apologize for the wind. For whatever reason, it's decided that my apartment is very windy, and so it is like a sound prison for me as well as a visual prison because I'm literally staring at white walls. This is the only visual stimulation that this room has aside from that piece of wood in the corner. So that's the thing that we have to live with. I'm sorry. Maybe one day I will punch the wind for you. So comics we're reviewing today. We're talking about Amazing Spider-Man number 57 and 58, Sword number 2, Immortal Hulk number 42, and X-Men number 17. For those of you who have never seen an episode of the Bogenrieder Variety Hour, what we do is we first go through it without spoilers, and then potentially after intermission where I give myself time to, refresh, then we go into what we call the spoiler zone, which is where, obviously, we discuss the book with lots more spoilers. And I am going to save Amazing Spider-Man number 58 for last. Not because it's the one that came out the most recently, but it's the one that I've had the most discussion about since I've been on other shows. I've discussed different theories of other people, and I want to talk about those separately in the spoiler zone. So we'll be talking about Amazing Spider-Man on its separately for its 2 issues, not as one giant monolith like we did last time with the .lr issues and the main issues. So that's important to note. And then at the end, we'll be discussing what we're doing next time in about 3 weeks, as well as who else we might have on the channel. So, also, my textbooks finally came in for this semester, and I gotta say, Chegg has the weirdest editions. They'll send you some weird free stuff, and it's always the most eclectic, themeless stuff they could ever send. So they give you these HelloFresh meal kits, or the coupons for them, $25 off of Shutterfly, this weird first aid beauty kit that's ultra repair cream for dry parched skin, and 20% off free 3 orders and a $0 delivering fee on your first order from DoorDash. So I don't know who's smoking what at Chegg, but it's the most entertaining service I've ever had in terms of items that I am getting. So thank you, Chegg. I will never use what you give me, but it is nice to know that you care about me enough to send this absolute nonsense of a package. So to begin, let's talk about Amazing Spider-Man number 57. I'm going to put up this. There we go. So the solicit reads, Spider-Man continues to pick up the pieces and try to put his life together. But many of the gathering storms are swirling more and more violently. We want to tell you more, but it will spoil so much of Last Remains. I'm gonna be honest, that's absolute bull. Having read every issue up until now, Last Remains post-mortem hasn't been like the most disappointing follow-up to Last Remains, but it certainly feels like there are things that could, like the plot could be moving a bit faster, or we could be getting more resolution than we already are. That said, this is still a good book. I'd be willing to give it a B+, but I'm sticking with a B. That is how I have felt about this entire arc so far, and it's probably going to reflect in my grade for 58 as well. So there's a few standout things here. The first is Peter. Peter is obviously, without going too far into spoilers, Peter is very much damaged from his encounter with Kindred in the last arc. And his behavior in this arc, especially in his dynamic with the Spider family, MJ, and Norman, all reflect this. And I appreciate that Peter isn't just walking away from this unscathed. I think that's incredibly important, that these kinds of things don't just go away. Again, a major highlight is Norman. Norman has actually been one of the highlights for the Last Remains arc for me. Not just as sensitive Norman that we're getting in this arc, but also as Spencer's rendition of the Green Goblin. I've said it many times that I think this is the best Norman we've gotten since Marvel Knights back in 2005. So, high praise coming from someone who thinks that Mark Millar's Marvel Knights is one of the highlights of the 2000s for me, especially compared to Straczynski's run. So, good work, Spencer. You've done really good work with Norman. I'd argue even character defining. I don't expect Sensitive Norman to last very long, but seeing this withheld Norman who expresses a lot of regret, contrasted with a visibly angry Peter, it's very refreshing. I don't think we've ever seen a dynamic quite like this. Maybe the Mackie Byrne era Norman, but I would need to. The dynamic is a little different. That said, the Spider family is continually useless. They berate Peter even though he's visibly mentally stressed, and they're like, well, why didn't we get any answers? And then they just leave. I'd argue that half the characters that appear here could just go away completely and nothing would change. The only people who have offered, major character dynamic with Peter in this arc have been Miles, Gwen, Madam Web. Silk, Anya, and Spider-Woman, Jessica Drew, they didn't need to be here. You could have removed them entirely from this and nothing would have changed. And I've spoken with people who are really aggravated that Ben and Kane didn't show up here. Now, granted, I kind of wish Ben and Kane had been here too. But that said, this entire arc was already bloated as it was. I don't think we need to exacerbate the problem by having even more characters that show up and do nothing. Because I would rather have a separate arc where Peter, Ben, and Kane do an all-boys trip than just having Ben and Kane be redundancies in a group that is already filled to the brim with redundancies. And I say that as someone who doesn't hold any specific ill will towards the Spider family. I just think that, editorially, someone probably forced this on Spencer. Because the minute he could, Spencer pushed them off to the side, and they were part of the .lr issues. And that leads me to think that Spencer really didn't want to write about the Spider family, he wanted to write about Peter. Which is good. I actually appreciate that from Spencer, because I am not someone who actively hates the Spider family, but I'd rather see them off in their own title rather than actively interfering and stealing the spotlight away from Peter. So it just kind of feels like their presence here was completely unwarranted. Because they basically showed up only to be put into a separate, essentially different series. So I'm not sure how to deal with that. Like I said, the dynamic between Peter and Norman is great, especially when you've got Kindred in a box off to the side. I don't think he's going away. Not anytime soon. Whether or not he gets out of the box is a completely different story, but I think it's important to note that that Kindred isn't going anywhere. I think whatever resolution is happening is staying around until issue 100 or issue 900, whichever milestone makes them more money. Probably number 900 because that's going to get them a $10 80-page trade-size book. I did have some issues with the art. I know I've been a little hard on Mark Bagley, but I like to think that I have good reason to be. Mark Bagley is arguably one of those quintessential Spider-Man artists, and it kind of feels like he's past his prime, he's over the hill, but he's still a really good artist, especially when you compare him to some of his contemporaries. I would gladly take a Mark Bagley over like a Ramon Villalobos any day. I think what it comes down to is the inker. So looking at the credits page, I can pull it up real quick because I own the digital copy. Sorry, let's get this looked at. I'm pulling over to the credits page. So, looking at the credits page, Mark Bagley has, I believe 3 different inkers on this issue. Yeah, so you've got John Dell, Andrew Hennessy, and Andy Owens as the inkers. And that is not a healthy amount of inkers. And looking at the pages, you can tell which ones are which. The ones where there are so many incomplete lines and like weird facial expressions, those are the ones that I can tell are John Dell, because I've seen his work before in Superior Spider-Man doing Cameron Cully's inks. He's a very noticeable inker. That said, there are some mysteries that I'll get into later. I'll cover the spoilers for 57 and 58 together. I kind of changed my mind on that like just now, but let's see. I do think it is important to note that like there is a mystery, and part of the problem I've had, not necessarily with this run, but it's one that's kind of reflected with Null, is that we've got too many different parts running together, right? I used to have a visual aid for this that I used on the crawl space once before, but we had, at the time of ASM 42, 11 different running storylines, and I personally think that's too many. It's the same with the X-Men books. We have too many X-Men books going on right now. We need to sort some out. And I get wanting to progress the Peter MJ story a bit more, and trust me, I want that as well. But if we can take some time and resolve a couple of the lingering story arcs that are still on the plate, I'm perfectly fine with delaying the Peter MJ proposal stuff, or whatever's happening with that. And this ties into, I do want to talk about solicits too. I talked about them with Chris on his stream, and in the last episode of the Bogenrieder Variety Hour, but I'm way more excited for ASM 61 through 64 in the next 2 months than I am for 59 and 60. I just think that Kindred's mega arc has been so long that I just want to do something different for once. And again, I don't hate the Kindred arc. I actually really liked the Last Remains mega arc starting from ASM 45. I just think that, once in a while you need to let it breathe, put it off to the side, and resolve something else. That's all I really got for that. So without spoilers, let's move on to Sword number 2. Now, I talked about this book on the Crawl Space Satellites podcast because it's the King of Black tie-in. Null won't go away. I'm reading a bunch of books right now, and every time I pick up a book, there's Null. It's like that one roommate or that one friend who you've kind of like collectively agreed with your friends, he's kind of annoying, I don't want to be around him. But he's always there in the corner drinking your Diet Coke or whatever the hell you drink. I don't care, I don't discriminate on that. But he's the guy who always is taking your drinks and is generally considered to be the weak link in your friend group. Oh well. But this is but given that this is a cosmic book, and I shared this sentiment on Guardians of the Galaxy when we were on 3 weeks ago with the last episode of reviewing books, that Sword and Guardians of the Galaxy are the best situations, or the best books to handle this kind of crossover, especially the cosmic one. Real quick, I want to take a swig from my giant bottle of water. I'm not sponsored by SodaStream, by the way. Their bottles are massive. That's why I love them so much. I don't even carbonate it. I just drink it straight from the bottle. But once again, I really enjoyed Sword. I can't give this book enough praise, and it does have a caveat, but I'll get to that later at the tail end of this part of the review. So once again, Valerio Schiti and Marte Gracia are an absolute powerhouse creative team, artistically at least. Ewing provides a lot of the written language, but it's up to Schiti and Gracia to translate that into looking good, and they've done an amazing job with that. I'm real quick. I'm gonna pull up my file of concept art for Sword, because I think that it's emblematic of what I like so much. Hang on. Window capture, add source. File. Here we go. I think. No, wait. No, that's Explorer, not Photos. Oh, does it not capture? Well, that sucks. But yeah, I have this file of Sword concept art, and I love the visual design language that Schiti and Gracia have, or I think Gracia did the actual colors in the book, but Schiti did the flats. But I love the design language that they've given the members of Sword. I'm gonna delete that real quick. Sorry, I didn't think about this before. There we go. Okay. Hang on. Am I doing the right input? Oh God. Now I have no right to dig on Zach when he's, Okay, now I'm doing it right. Yay! Okay, so something else I really like is, one of my problems with the Dawn of X books is that, the data pages. Because it's something that I really liked in House of X Power as a 10, but it's not something that the other writers in the Dawn of X lineup have used effectively. And I think the most egregious of that is Benjamin Percy on X-Force and Wolverine, because he essentially uses the data pages as basically prose. He's writing a novel inside of a comic book, and that's the last place you want to use a data page. But I like how the data pages in Sword are based around Abigail Brand's personal notes, and discussing, the intricacies of Sword as a team, rather than just writing like, oh, here's a thing that happened. But it's Brand contemplating the characters that she's around and how to deal with them. Like, she's talking about Mentallo and Fabian Cortez, noting that one of them is a sellout, essentially a sellout, and the other is a madman. I did appreciate that Ewing does a lot of deep cuts, particularly in terms of Mentallo. because there's a vehicle that he uses that hasn't been seen in I think ever since Captain America number 346, the think tank. But excellent use of fight scenes and excellent use of just obscure characters. It was great to see Peepers. It was great to see what's the character? Random? I think it is Random. But take a minute to push aside the A-listers like Cable and Magneto, and just focusing on the lesser characters. And something I've always appreciated with Ewing is that he's taken the time to explore those lesser-known characters. It's probably one of his highlights to take obscure characters and make them feel like they have a purpose in the universe again. I'm going to kill that fly later. But a very good use of fight scenes. Excellent pacing. The fight scene between the symbiote dragon and the mutants of Krakoa could have gone on forever, but it went on just long enough to show how powerful the mutants can be, especially when they're powered up by Fabian. There's not a whole lot to say with this issue. I think the problem is that Sword tends to follow in the footsteps of other X-Men books. I'm not to say it's bad, but I do think it's a little lighter on plot than a book like Immortal Hulk, which is 42 issues in. Reminder that we're only 2 issues into Sword so far. There's not a whole lot of extra plot, or not a whole lot of massive substance. There is a twist that I kind of rolled my eyes at, but that's not necessarily because of Ewing. That's because of the event it's crossing over with, and so that kind of ticked me off. But there is something I want to talk about, and that's that the next issue has 4 different artists. So Valerio Schiti is returning, but for whatever reason, there's 3 extra artists. There's Bernard Chang, Nico Leon, and I think Anthony Heitz. And that bothered me a little, because I'm reading this book primarily for Ewing because I love the characters, but also because I love the art. That's one of the main reasons I stuck around for Dan Slott's Iron Man run, was because Valerio Schiti was drawing, and then like midway through the run, he just stopped doing issues. And he got replaced by Juan Ramirez and Francesco Mana. All these other discount Valerio Schiti's when I came for Valerio Schiti, and because I appreciate his design language. And if this is going to be a problem that plagues the book onward, that kind of worries me. It's not as bad as getting a really bad artist. The only one I can think of that I didn't like in that new lineup was Nico Leon. I don't know. It just feels like, she has a hard time meeting deadlines. I don't know what it is. He does amazing work, by the way. This is not a knock against Schiti. I'm just curious as to why Sword is demanding so many different artists to fill in, and what's causing it. I don't know if I showed... I don't think I showed the... I don't think I did. I don't think I showed the cover for the new issue for Sword. There we go. I feel bad now because I didn't keep my promise. Oh no. But Protocol 5 I thought it was interesting. There's only one spoiler, really, when we get to Spoiler Zone. So we'll talk about that when we get to it. But I gave it an A+. On the Satellite Podcast, and I really don't see any justifiable reason to change that grade. Sword's a great book. It might read better in trade format, but for now I haven't had a really huge gripe with it aside from what's to come with the major art team shift. Now she's she's been solicited for the next 2 issues or the next 3 issues along with the others on issue 3. But it's kind of alarming when 3 issues in we're suddenly getting fill-ins from artists who have never been solicited before in this book. So that's kind of eyebrow raiser more than a flaw, but I guess next we can go to Immortal Hulk number 42. Written by Al Ewing, art by the solicit's a lie. It's not Joe Bennett. He's only there for a couple pages. The real artist, I think, is Rachel Stott. Let me go check real quick because I've got it in front of me, both on there and on my tablet. So, good lord. Looking for the credits. I keep reading the tail end. Alex Linz is the art leader sequence, and then Andy Gorham. Oh, so Alex Linz does the leader sequences, Adam Gorham does the Gamma Flight sequences, Rachel Stott does the Jackie McGee sequences, and then Joe Bennett does the UFO sequence. So there's four different. I don't think this is a problem with Ewing. I think this is just a problem with the deadlines, and I think that's why Immortal Hulk is being pushed back and went off the 3 issues every 2 month schedule, is just because it takes so much out of Joe Bennett. But I thought this was a really good issue, and it got back to the Hell-based stuff. Because the last 2 issues we've had a really big focus on Joe Fixit and Savage Hulk, the personalities. So it was good to get back to focusing on characters that weren't that. So we got a bit of focus on Gamma Flight this issue, which I thought was a very good choice. Because we've seen them on and off throughout the run, but every so often they have the focus put back on them, and I thought this was a really good place to do it, especially with the last issue, where Absorbing Man had, or not last issue, but issue 40, where Absorbing Man and Titania had some of the best lines of the issue. Yeah. It was also good to get back to Jackie McGee, because I don't think we've seen her since issue 36. Now, granted, she's taken something of a backseat role since she kind of left the main cast in issue 24, and she's had frequent appearances since then. But it's been a while she's been like in the actual spotlight rather than on the sidelines, reacting to what's happening around her, as opposed to being in the thick of it. And I think this was a good place to reintroduce her, especially after the events of issue 36. Ending was a little weird, but it was a good cliffhanger. We also got back to leader. This was essentially the immortal leader in Gamma Flight, the issue. Hulk actually has very little to do in this issue. That's not really a huge spoiler, but the Hulk barely features in this issue at all. I don't think he even appears once, or at least Savage Hulk, because Bruce appears with the leader in Hell, but not the actual Hulk, Savage, and Joe Fixit, who are running off on their own. And I'm honestly fine with that. It's good to focus on the side characters every once in a while, because we've had so much focus on Hulk. So when I say these are things that happen, don't take them as like criticisms. They're just objective truths. Art was okay. Joe Bennett has set such a high bar for this book that it's really hard to compete with him when it comes to creating the visuals of the environments that we usually associate with this book. But he doesn't. But the fill-ins do a pretty solid job. Like I said, Rachel Stott and Alex Linz, Adam Gorham, and Rachel Stott do a good job. It's just that we're used to Joe Bennett, and we were promised Joe Bennett, so I expect Joe Bennett. I don't know. I'd give this one an A-, just because I wasn't given Joe Bennett. But we did get a good refocusing of the lens back on the side characters. That's really all I've got to say about that. It was also good to see Samson reacting to everything within the Sasquatch body that he got in issue 40. And also very good to see Henry Gyrich acting on his own. He's kind of been a bit player in this book so far. I think he only had like one appearance. but he's quickly established himself as a major threat alongside the UFOs. In fact, he's the one who's leading them at the end of the book. So I think we're in a good place with Immortal Hulk. I am a bit sad that it's not 3 issues every 2 months, but if we can get more quality work, then I'm fine with it. The covers for issue 40, the covers for issues I think 48 and 49 were released on Alex Ross's Instagram, and they don't really seem very conclusive. Joe Bennett, I think, said that Ewing said, I'm looking up Alex Ross's Instagram right now, because why not? I could just be wrong. Did I not see it in the right place? I saw it on Comic Vine. Or on a Comic Vine Discord server, so it could be there. I don't know. It's not on here. I'm not seeing it, at least. Yeah, so good book. I do wonder when it's going to conclude, though, because Bennett said it was ending with issue 50, but I haven't seen anything to indicate, like looking at the covers, I don't think it's going to end there. So, yeah, we're in a weird place in terms of when it's going to end, but I think it's going to end within at least 10 issues. So, go do that, I guess. Moving on. Oh boy, it's X-Men. You know what time it is. Did it shift? Oh no. Okay. Shifted my window. Fuck you. Okay. Oh, we're on the... Okay. Okay, so X-Men number 17, written by Jonathan Hickman, art by Brett Booth. I don't know who does inks, but I know Frank Go does the colors. Okay, this one I know is pissing a lot of people off. So, there's a bit of a controversy around Brett Booth. I don't remember what exactly it was, but I know he made some really edgy comments back in like 2012, and he pissed a lot of people off with that. But Hickman apparently asked Brett Booth to do this issue personally, or specifically he personally requested Booth to do this issue, and that pissed a lot of people off. Now, I don't have that same reservation about Booth as everybody else does, mainly because I wasn't around for the drama that happened with Booth, but understand this, that I understand if that drama made you feel like, you had to skip this issue because of the controversy surrounding that particular creative team. I know that people avoid Scott Lobdell for the same reason. So, if you skip this issue, I completely understand. But that said, I read it just because I had my collection. It just felt logistically weird to not get this issue. And I promise to be as objective with it as I possibly can be. So, basically, here's the deal with what's happening with this one. It's a one and done, and so I think it's Lilandra, the daughter of Xavier and Xandra from the Shire Empire, has gone missing, and it's up to Cyclops, Marvel Girl, Storm to get her back. There's a lot that goes on in this issue, but let's talk about the art first, because I know that's the big meanie bobini bit that's got everyone really upset. So Brett Booth actually does some okay work in this issue. And I want to address this real quick. The people who are saying that if Brett Booth comes back to X-Men, hundreds of thousands of copies will be sold, X-Men as a brand will be saved, you're delusional, okay? Whoever has that mentality that like a single artist will come and single-handedly save a brand with their art, you are frankly delusional, and I used to think this way about Hickman when he was coming into X-Men. And personally, I think House and Powers of X are wonderful stories, but part of the problem is that they haven't really gone anywhere with that status quo since. This is what I feel is one of the issues. After issue 16, we're getting a lot more advancement in the political status quo of Krakoa as a nation. And I say that because the first 5 or 6 issues of X-Men feel like an absolute slog. And that's coming from someone who's generally liked the title. And then you get like the Empire tie-ins and the X of Swords tie-in, and it feels like it's kind of taken a back seat to other books. But issues 16 and 17, where the book is finally stepping up and letting Hickman shine with the Shi'ar stuff, as well as, you know, giving Cyclops and Jean something to really do, because Cyclops has been a fairly attached character. He's been attached to other people's hips most of this run, and him striking out and doing his own thing is refreshing, and it's interesting to see the dynamic of Krakoa as a nation. But that goes back to my original point, that Hickman had some serious trouble getting the book to, you know, pick up steam. And it's only just recently it suffered a massive slowdown during Empire, or at least the last issue of the Empire tie-in. And it's just now that it's getting back on its feet. And I think that, like, people don't recognize it about Hickman. And I think people who think that Brett Booth alone will save the X-Men title, that's where I think the delusion should be addressed at, is that no single person can just single-handedly save a brand. Even if they're handling a significant amount of the weight, they can often stumble, and I think Brett Booth is just as fallible. But that said, he does some good art in this issue. That said, Brett Booth, I don't know if you're listening to this particular episode of my show, but you gotta tone down the detail, man. You've got like a crease and a wrinkle on every goddamn thing you touch. And while I appreciate the detail, there is so much stuff going on in each panel that it gave me an absolute headache. And it's not like, you know, Pepe Larraz, where like he does a really good job with shadows, but Booth has like all these weird lines going all over the place, and it's really distracting. In one panel, I think it's the one where Cyclops and Jean and Storm are talking to Deathbird. There is so much detail in like this one panel where they're just standing and talking, and it almost hurt to read. But there are some panels where Booth absolutely shines. The panels where he's got the characters in actual fight scenes, they're great. That's where his work actually shines, and it's not just characters doing action poses, it's them actually engaging in action. There's a great use of combination of powers. I love the way he draws Storm's lightning mixing with Cyclops' optic blasts. That's where we should see stuff. That's where we should see Brett Booth. And I think going to X-Men Legends, which is basically a revival of the 90s era of X-Men, that's the book where he belongs. And artists like Larraz and Mohammed Azrar, this is the book where they belong. And I'm glad Azrar is coming back for issue 18 next month, and I believe February 24th. So it's good that they're putting Booth to use in a book where he can actually work, and not in a book where like there's so like where it's focused more on the socio-political situations and not just pure action. Like I mentioned, there's that page at the beginning where it feels like characters just doing, like they have so much going on in a page where not a whole lot is happening. That said, I do like the way that Booth draws the costumes. This issue actually saw the return of Jean and Scott's X-Factor costumes, as opposed to the new House of X Cyclops costume and the return of Jean's old green Marvel Girl dress. And I think that at least Jean's costume this time was a much stronger one to use in the Marvel Girl costume. I don't understand the desire to use the Marvel Girl dress. I think it's a very weird choice, especially when all the characters have these newer and frankly much better designs. And then you've got Jean here in her old 1970s dress. But like I said, this issue is very well written. One of the data pages, I think it's emblematic of Hickman's success in writing Cannonball and Sunspot. I think that Hickman understands those two characters specifically, but I think he also has a very good handle on writing Cyclops, Jean, Storm, and kind of Smasher. But, they're kind of characters who only pop up every now and then. But every time he writes Cyclops, I understand the authority, I understand why Scott's in charge. I just think that this should have been a different artist. Maybe if they'd given Booth one of the X of Swords issues where Apocalypse was fighting Genesis, that would have been a better place to put him. But this is a book that feels a lot more talk focused rather than hyperkinetic action. Because there's there's a few scenes where Booth absolutely shines as an artist, but then there's a bunch where it feels like characters doing like these random action poses when they don't need to. I've seen people compare Brett Booth to Alex Milne, and I disagree on that front because Alex Milne knows when to tone the hell down. He knows when less is more, and the problem is that Brett Booth doesn't know when less is more. And I'm sorry, Mr. Booth, if you're listening to this, I know you probably aren't listening to some 22-year-old in his college apartment giving you artist tips, but none of this is actually personal. None of this is personal. This is just an expression of opinion. I'm sure that you have your fans, and I think, granted, your fan base is well deserved. But this issue just felt like it was all over the place in terms of art. But yeah, strong character elements, some really good art, some not so good art. I'd give it a B+. Next month we're getting the Children of the Vault plotline resolved, so hopefully that turns out okay. Moving on, last issue of the night. Yay! AS-78, written by Nick Spencer. I gotta say, I'm tired of the solicits lying to me on the creative team, because it's not Mark Bagley, it's Marcelo Ferreira, and that drives me nuts, because Ferreira was the worst part of Sin's Rising, and I don't know what motivated them to bring him back. I think this issue would have absolutely benefited from better artists. There's some genuinely good scenes that benefit from Shadow, but I just don't see it working. The art is all over the place in this issue. I've made comments on Bagley before, and I think those comments are absolutely justified. But, and this is a very big but, Ferrier is a definite step down. His faces are absolutely bonkers. Particularly Aunt May and Peter. Peter's face looks like he's melting half the time. I'm sorry. I'm a lot more critical of this book on my show than I am on Spidey Dude Experience. And it's after I've had time to kind of reflect. Because I usually record those. We recorded the modern episodes the day of the issue coming out. And so I have a bit more time to sit back and think about it. I don't know, in the interest of time, I'm thinking of, only do spoilers for ASM in terms of theorizing. And maybe Immortal Hulk, but not a lot to discuss in X-Men that can be taken with interpretation. But this felt like a much slower issue, if that makes sense. It takes place mostly without a flashback, but there is some incredibly pivotal moments in this issue that I think cannot be ignored. And this issue is kind of a must-read because it provides a lot of context to things that have happened earlier in Spencer's run, particularly between Kingpin and Kindred. As well as I did some theorizing earlier today, some game theory stuff. And again, when it comes to the theory of the characters, Spencer understands the characters. He gets Aunt May, he gets Peter, he gets Norman Osborn, he gets Kingpin, and I think he understands Harry and Kindred. I think Mr. Negative was a good choice to use for a villain. You got the Inner Demons here on the cover, but I don't know. This issue felt like more of a B to me. It felt a lot slower, and like I said with my review of ASM 57, I'm kind of just ready for this particular bit of Spencer's run to be over. It's not as bad as like the 2099 arc, where like it just felt like it was a wet fart at the end. But I've been on this train for 15 issues now. Just let me do something else. That said, the issue was fine. We'll talk about the spoilers when we get to the spoiler zone. But it felt like those pivotal moments were kind of buried. There was some great character work between Peter Parker and Liz Allen, which makes sense considering the fallout of Last Remains. And I feel like this should have been solicited as the issue where, like, Last Remains gets spoiled. And the solicits for this issue and the last issue should have been swooped around. I don't know, that's kind of weird to me, I think. So real quick, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we're going to come back into the spoiler zone. So I'm going to go to intermission, and we'll be back in 5. Okay, we are back. Okay, so welcome to the spoiler zone where we talk about whatever we want. Okay, so I want to kind of get the first book out of the way. Well, I don't want not the first, but the quickest books get out of the way. So we're gonna go X-Men, then Sword, then Immortal Hulk, and then ASM 5758 in one go. So, with X-Men, there's not a whole lot to say. The main thing that comes out is that the X-Men kind of come to, or Storm specifically comes into debt with the Shi'ar Empire. And I think it's going to be interesting to play out because the X-Men have traditionally been allied with the Shi'ar forever. And, you know, being able to cash in on a debt, especially not one that they don't, something they don't need immediately, is interesting, and I want to know where that goes. It's not really a whole lot that I've thought of yet, because I tend not to think about X-Men as much as I do like the other books. So the only real thing of substance is like, you know, seeing Sunspot interact with Deathbird again after New Mutants, which is a book that I dropped 7 issues in because I didn't care about anything but the original New Mutants. It's good to see again, and it's proof that Hickman can write Sunspot and Cannonball probably better than any mutant character ever. Probably better than any mutant he writes aside from maybe Monet and Cyclops. Excuse me. Sword. I mentioned in the main review that I was really ticked off at something, and that is Cable being possessed by Null. It's something that I thought of in Daredevil, but I'm kind of tired of all these possessed characters. Their designs are uninspired, especially for Sheedy because he's designed an entirely different uniform set for Sword, and just to see like, oh, he's got a swirly pattern on his chest and sharp teeth now. It's really lackluster, and it was something that happened in this week's Daredevil that kind of made me just realize, you know, Null's just dragging everybody down. When Matt just gets like pointier horns and a swirl on his chest, and I'm like, or not a swirl, but like the symbiote dragon symbol, and I was like, congratulations! Yay! He has a symbiote now! Again! And I was like, I don't care! The designs are interesting, and King in Black is just making me uninterested. And that's the disappointing part of, you know, King in Black is that like the designs aren't even interesting. They can't even make good Funko Pops out of them. That's the worst part. I'm joking. Funko Pops are trash. But my point, I think, is valid that there's nothing interesting happening with the design language of Null. It's just more symbiote stuff. And when everyone's already had a symbiote before, like in Venomized, it just feels so redundant. And I don't care about it. So congratulations, congratulations, this is like this is I think his first dud as a design for me. And honestly, I don't care about Null, so, and we know Cable's gonna be fine. He's got an ongoing, so he's not gonna go away. And I might want to talk about Cable one day, but that might be when I get the trades. So I don't know. The Null stuff is frustrating, because I know people who really enjoy King in Black, but I don't, and I feel like I'm being like a mini Bobini when it comes to talking about King in Black, but I'm sorry, there's nothing fundamentally interesting about yet another symbiote invasion. And it was interesting kind of at first, but then it just kind of turned into, oh, the heroes gained some kind of advantage, oh, wait, they lost again. Time to fight Null! Woo! I'm kind of glad Case's Venom is ending now, because we have to put up more stuff like this. I'm going to lose my mind. That's not a major spoiler. I do like that Fabian Cortez, like 2 issues in, he's already making tracks with Magneto again. And it's good to see Magneto's kind of sticking around, not just there for the first issue. I thought that was very well handled. Their dynamic is interesting. I wish they'd give Frenzy more to do, because she's kind of just been there as like, you know, the fighter. And letting her explore the diplomacy angle a bit more, aside from just doing fastball specials with a scroll, I feel like we could get a bit more mileage out of that. I don't know. I still enjoy it. I got a little wish list of things that I want to see happen. And there is one thing I want to talk about after the spoilers. And actually, let's talk about it right now. Let's talk about the X-Men vote. So that's fun. That said, I do have to question the wisdom of the X-writers putting on people who already have their own teams. Like Polaris is on X Factor; she's a leading character on X Factor. You've got Armor, who is in Sword. Cannonball and Sunspot, I kind of don't want them there just because you can only get one. And I think that Cannonball and Sunspot are kind of a working pair. But it feels weird that they picked this of all that they picked those lineups. I personally don't have a preference for who they pick. I do feel kind of sad for people like Leah Williams who have clearly enjoyed writing Polaris, and she has to take her off that book or has to share her with Hickman. I don't envy that anyway. I genuinely don't envy that position, and my heart goes out to you. Not even ironically, but genuinely, I know you've enjoyed writing these characters, and I've enjoyed reading X Factor. Not enough to put on my roster for the show, but it's been a good ride every time I pick it up. So, whoever wins. Also, there's been some weird stuff. Apparently they made a bot to manufacture votes for Tempo. And Tempo is a really obscure pick. I think they made a bot to vote for it. I don't know. Where's the bot? Oh, they made a bot to vote for Banshee and Forge. And Forge I don't get because he's over in X-Force. I think that's the book where he shines the most. So, I don't know. Just maybe find different characters who aren't in a different team book already. I can't think of any off the top of my head. But, I think the lineup we had in House of X number 3 and 4, Cyclops, Jean, Monet, Husk, Archangel, Nightcrawler, and Wolverine. I think one more that I might be missing. Hang on, let me go to Comixology and look this up. Okay. Oh, and Mystique. I knew I was forgetting someone. That would be a fine one, but there's rules against council members running in half the team as council members, and I think Monet's going to be an X-Corp if they make that. But, okay, so from a purely community engagement standpoint, this is great. This is a really good way to get X-Men fans engaged and feel like they're contributing to the status quo. I think that voting for the team was a phenomenally good PR move on Marvel's part. Congratulations, X-Men team. You did something good in the real world that translates to probably more sales. You also got gifted fans to care about the X-Men brand aside from just the gifted. So, yay! I don't know who I'd care about winning more. I think my top two choices are Boom Boom and Armor. I've heard rumors. I was talking with a friend on Discord, and we were talking about we don't really know the rest of the lineup. I suspect the Hellfire Gala, if that's the next crossover like X of Swords was, it'll be revealed there. But we know that Cyclops and Jean are the two main team members, but I'm thinking we're going to get, we're going to get Laura, Wolverine, Monet, Doug's large wife, Bay, and then Darwin and Sync from the Children of the Vault storyline that's going on right now as the main team members, as well as the final team member. I don't know about Sync and Darwin. That's a weird choice, but I'm open to seeing it work. It just needs to work. But yeah, this was a really good way to get the community engaged. And real quick, since we're here, let's talk about X-Books in general. Because we made a... someone on Code made a tier maker of X books. Real quick, I'm going to move this tab over into there. Okay, so I'm pulling this up. Here's the tier maker for the X-Men books. So House and Powers of 10, House of X and Powers of 10, God tier books. Perfect, I'd argue the perfect 12-issue maxi series. And Sword has been an absolute keynote. And then you've got some sleeper hit Hellions. I didn't expect Hellions to be as good as it is, but it's great so far, especially in the Sinister parts. And then you've got X-Force and X-Men, which I think are the two best leading books. X-Factor and X of Swords were fine. Cable, I could argue being bumped into an A, but it kind of feels like Cable's too big of a weenie, even as self-referential as the book is of that fact, for it to be up that high. And then you've got like the C stuff. I honestly think I could argue myself into bumping New Mutants down to a D, because I haven't read anything outside the Hickman stuff, and the Brisen stuff has just been boring, and I haven't read the Vita Alice stuff, but I'm sure they put out some okay work. But, you know, it was 12 issues in, and after, when you only read 4 issues, that's a problem, and it's my problem, but it is still a problem. Wolverine, I could honestly put a couple of these into the D section. Wolverine, it's fine, I feel like we're just wasting talent. It's just X-Force, but focused on Wolverine. You're wasting Adam Cooper and Victor Bogdanovic on that book, when they could be off doing like a completely different time. I would love to see Bogdanovic on Amazing Spider-Man. He's basically discount Greg Capullo, and Batman and Spider-Man have pretty similar fighting, kinetic action scene kind of style fights. So I'd be interested to see how Bogdanovic draws Spider-Man, considering he's basically a diet Greg Capullo. Giant-sized X-Men, it felt a little weird to make it all one-shots. They could have just made it like 5-issue mini. It was an interesting plot, and it had great art by Dowderman and Rod Reyes. But and then Marauders has kind of been on and off good. I don't read it, and I only like binge read it, so I guess that kind of attributes how I feel about it. It's there. I don't hate it. I just feel like I wish they were using Cassell in a different book, maybe put him back on ASM. But I feel like they've kind of misused Cassell over the past 5 years since they put him on Ironheart, and since then he's kind of just been on Iron Man, and then what was he on before Marauders? What was he on? I don't even remember. But yeah, Fallen Angels and Excalibur are shit. T.E. Howard has no sense of pacing, and then Fallen Angel, and also it relies entirely on the character dynamics, which kind of just go away after a while. We're missing one of the major ones. I don't hold any ill will toward people who enjoy these books. Again, my opinion goes as far as myself. I cannot tell anyone what they like or don't like. But for me, Excalibur is the book that needs to end. And I'm hoping that when the Hellfire Gala happens, we get some kind of culling. Because Giant Size is over, but Wolverine is pointless. Excalibur has serious pacing problems and has basically mutinized Otherworld. Fallen Angels is dead, so yay. New Mutants feels like it's just Vita Ayala's, I guess, consolation prize until they get to write Children of the Atom, which is a book I'm not there looking forward to. Marauders feels like a natural endpoint because it's the Hellfire Gala. And then Cable, I don't see having a lot of longevity. And then Hellions is a book that feels like it's been a sales disaster, which really sucks, because Hellions has been a surprise great book for me. I don't say this out of, I'm not saying like they should be canceled because they're out and out bad, but I just don't think a bunch of these books have a lot of longevity. Even Wolverine, which is a book that people read because it's Wolverine, I don't see lasting long, and that's. Whatever. Moving on. Let's talk about Immortal Hulk. Yeah. Okay, so the big takeaway here was Jackie's gamma powers and the gamma flight stuff. Like I mentioned, it was a good place to bring Jackie back in because she's not really been doing a whole lot, and like her early goal in the first half of the book, until she's 24, was like, how can I get gamma powers? How can I be like you? And now she's getting what she wanted, but it comes with like that, the monkey paw kind of curling its finger there. Boom! I love that kind of stuff. This is the way you reactivate dead plot lines. Good work, Ewing. I like that kind of stuff. And I don't see Game of Flight going anywhere, mainly because Absorbing Man has been a great foil to Bruce in terms of personality, not necessarily in terms of physical fighting. But he and Titania have a great dynamic together, and I don't see Ewing writing one without the other. So, let's see him sticking around a while, especially with Sasquatch Samson. So, it's good to see Henry Garrick being a smug son of a bitch again. So good for them. I'm interested to see the UFOs. That sounds like a very specific thing to get excited about, but the UFOs I think are one of the underrated Hulk villains. And people don't talk about them as much as like the Leader or Abomination, mainly because they've been in movies. So it's good to see that. It's good to see them getting some renewed focus. The next issue I think is focusing on Joe Fixit, which is good. We've gotten a bit of too much focus on Joe Fixit, especially with so many moving parts. I feel like it's weird to focus on Joe and Savage too much. But I like that dynamic. It's just I'd like to move on. That takes us to Amazing Spider-Man. Okay, so let's talk about Harry, What's in the Box Osborn. So this one comes down to mostly theories. So there's two major theories I want to talk about. The first is who was the extra corpse in the morgue. The other is the other kind of Europe-related subplots. So the extra corpse, I've decided to either Harry Lyman, Spec 200 Harry, or Aunt May. There's not a whole lot of proof to go off of, mainly because Carly was freaking out. But I think that freak-out is an important plot point, mainly because it would solicit an emotional reaction from her, and I don't think a lot of characters would solicit that emotional response from her. The major one being probably Harry, but Aunt May being, or ASM 400 Aunt May being the real dead one, it feels like a bit of a weird twist, and I don't want to go down the Clone Saga route again, because we're already doing Clone Saga again in Miles's book. Yay! Is there Coke in here? Yeah. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. Okay. So, the corpse thing is weird because I feel like I'm overthinking some of this stuff, but, killed the fly. Thank you. I feel like I'm overthinking the corpse thing. It's either Harry or Aunt May. I'm sticking with those ones. Could be something completely different. I could have my expectations subverted. Yay. But the big one I want to talk about is ASM 58. And that's because there's some stuff I didn't think about earlier in my other analyses of the book that I want to talk about here. So the major takeaways were that Harry Lyman has been a ruse the entire time, and that Kingpin met Kindred in Paris, which is important because Paris has kind of been a recurring location within the Osborn family. Not just Harry, but Europe as a whole has been a big thing for Norman Osborn as well. If you consider Sin's past, when he got Gwen pregnant, that's where he sent her. I believe Europe is where he went after he died and faked his death in order to become the leader of the, what's the cartel? But he basically went there to run the European mafia. And that's the big takeaway. But Paris is important because I believe in either it's not ASM 620, I believe it's ASM 591, Mind on Fire, when Norman had Harry's death faked and sent him off to Europe to rehab in the new Proofs One More Day timeline. Now that's a lie. That tells me that Harry actually did die in Spec 200. And that ASM Harry is a root, or that post One More Day Harry Lyman is a ruse. I'm trying to find the comment on Europe from the crawl space because there was actually a good point about Europe. But Harry's body being in Europe would be a good precedent for Kindred to be there when Kingpin finds him. No, the Cabal of the Scryer. Yeah, after his death, and then Baby May was also sent to Paris with Alison Mongrain. And I want to point this out because it's something I talk about with McNulty outside of any Discord servers, and that's that Betty Brant could be involved in the Kingpin plot in some way. I bring this up because Betty has been mentioned several times over the course of Spencer Round ASM. I believe in ASM 11. ASM 15 and ASM 37. So you got Betty off in Europe, and in ASM 15, before he dies, Clone Ned tells Peter that Betty is in danger. And Betty is over in Europe on special assignment. And I believe in ASM 33, she mentions as foreign correspondent for the Daily Bugle. In ASM 37, it's very hard to notice. Let me pull it up on Comixology. I'm closing all these redundant links because I feel like I'm wasting way too much space. But in ASM 37, on the first page, it's a double-page spread, so there's a lot of detail there that you wouldn't notice. And there's a lot of extra detail in there. But let's go to this view. Let's go to game view. Okay, so in ASM 37, on this page, it's very hard to notice, but on this panel, Peter gets a call from Betty, and he's missed 17 calls. He's intentionally dodging her calls, talking about she's got something he might be interested in. So my theory is that Betty is not necessarily involved in the Kindred plot, but has stumbled onto it, and that's where she is, in Paris, where Kingpin and Harry first met. And there's a whole conspiracy wrapped up in that. I don't know what exactly is intrinsic to it, but that's a very deliberate location to have. So, yeah, Mike called me Kohai, and I said Arigato Sensei. But also, I want to point out that there's another connection there. So back in the early, first 200 issues of Amazing Spider-Man, Paris is where Ned and Betty went on their honeymoon, per ASM 184, because they got married in, I believe, ASM 156, and then by ASM 184, they'd gone on their honeymoon to Paris, and Betty was already back in the States after Ned went to Cyprus to cover the insurrection going on there. So I believe Paris is important, but there's a lot of details that are going on there. I feel very proud of myself for having found that connection, because Betty is a plot point that we haven't talked about in a while. The last time she was very important was in Slot's run at the tail end, I believe, for ASM 791. And that's the last time she had a real big significant part of the plot not dedicated to her, but the last time she was really involved in the plot. And if Betty Brant is one of the key elements, I'm glad I found this out right now. Not right now, but I found it out recently. so that when it comes time to cover that plot line, especially because Robbie's becoming relevant in ASM 63 with the Randy Janice storyline. So potentially Robbie coming in could reintroduce Betty into the narrative and make her a lot more important as time goes on. So that could be very important. I hope that anyone here who's listening to this and is reading Amazing Spider-Man pays attention to Betty, because she could be a lot more important than we're giving her credit for. But yeah, I think it's interesting. Kingpin wants the Lifeline tablet and is working with the Inner Demons to get it. So the reason why is abundantly clear since ASM number 7, is that he wants Vanessa and potentially Richard. But he needs a more than the Lifeline tablet, or the tablet of life and destiny. They're the same thing, but they have radically different names. It's weird. I promise it'll make it's just call it whatever you want. But what I'm wondering is, what other elements factor in? Does the Syndicate factor in? Does Robbie and Tombstone factor in? There's a lot of moving parts, and I particularly like this plotline, and I'm glad we're getting to follow up on it in the next 2 months or so with ASM 61 through 64, because this is some of this is probably where most of the plot lines that are going on Spider-Man's Run are going to interconnect with each other, not the Kindred stuff. Now there's plot lines that are connected to the tablet storyline that probably connect over to the Kindred storyline, but I think that, and that's obvious because Kingpin is the key linchpin between those two storylines, but I think that the tablet is probably the one we should be paying a bit more attention to in the future, because that's the one where a lot of the plot points are going to intersect, and then those plot points could be used later on for Kindred when we inevitably get to ASM 900 or ASM number 100 for this volume. I do think something else to bring up is the Goblin Armory in Harry's room. So it's not only a good reference to Web of Venom, the Good Son, but McNulty on the Crawlspace Discord raised a very good question about why there's no Goblin costume. So the Goblin gear is a good indicator that Harry Lyman, or the Harry Osborn we've been following since Brand New Day, is either a clone or some kind of spiritual doppelganger or meat puppet. And that the body that is in the morgue that Carly got attacked in is Harry's pre-Spec 200 body, the one that he originally died in. So Peter in the story raises a very good point that Harry having the Green Goblin gear is kind of weird because he doesn't need it. He's got the supernatural demon powers of Kindred. So that raises the question of why does he have the Goblin gear? And I've heard theories that that's either Harry wants to become a real boy again and become the Green Goblin, or that Normie Osborn is becoming the Green Goblin and he feels visibly betrayed by his family members for lying to him. But I think that's another plot point you want to keep your eyes on, is the Green Goblin, because you got Sensitive Norman over here trying to play the voice of reason within the Osborn family, but then you've got the mystery of why this Goblin gear is sitting around in Harry's apartment. And granted, that was answered in ASM 800 when Harry used the Goblin Glider to fight Red Goblin. But I think it's important to keep an eye on that, because it could have ramifications for days. That's kind of the ones I want to talk about. So, fuck you, Fly. So we're out of spoiler zone, so let's talk about what we're reviewing next time. We're either going to wait 2 weeks or 3 weeks. That's because I don't really have a whole lot. There's only one book that I'm reading that comes out on the 3rd of February. Hang on. So within 2 weeks, we'll be reviewing Immortal Hulk, Sword number 3, or Immortal Hulk number 43, Sword number 3, and ASM number 59, which ends the negative space arc. And then, optionally, if we do 3 weeks and we wait that long, we'll also be reviewing Iron Man number 6 and Amazing Spider-Man number 60, which ends, I guess, the Sins Rising to Blast Remains mega arc. And I think that might be what we do, just because it gives us not only more substance in the show, but it also just kind of wraps it up all in one go. We don't have to wait for ASM when we're going into the next Bogenrieder Variety Hour for reviews. And there's also some other things I want to talk about. So right now I'm working with Brad from the Crawl Space to do a show on my end. Rather than him hosting me, I'll be hosting him. And we're working on topics, and if anyone here is listening to the back recording, or if Brad's listening, I'd like to know what kind of topics you want to hear from him, because his podcasts are Spider-Man focused, and this is an opportunity for him to talk about things that aren't Spider-Man. So it's interesting. I'd love to hear what you would want to ask Brad if you're listening from the Crawl Space. And then also, depending on how the stars align, I want to get Kelly, who has worked with me on a bunch of other shows before, on Spidey Experience, on Satellites, on the main Crawl Space podcast. And I want to, since we're at the halfway point now, I want to talk with her about WandaVision. Since we're at the halfway point on WandaVision, what the fourth episode confirms, denies, and where we're going to go from there. I think that'll be an interesting show. And if anybody else has opinions on WandaVision they want to express, let me know. I'll bring you onto the show, even though only one of you is watching. So, with that out of the way, I think it's time to call end to the third episode. So, alright, y'all have a good night, and I will see you on the next episode, or on Monday. See you guys.